The dust storm rolled across the Badlands like a brown wall of judgment, swallowing the sun and turning midday into twilight. Matthew Pike squinted through the haze. His bandana pulled tight over nose and mouth as he drove another survey stake into the rocky ground. The metal rang sharp against stone, a lonely sound that died quick in the howling wind. He'd been out here since dawn, marking the eastern boundary of Pike's Bend where the land dropped into a narrow canyon. The work had to be done right, every measurement, every angle recorded proper in his leather-bound ledger. Out here, a man's claim was only as good as his paperwork, and Matt had learned long ago that careful men lived longer than careless ones. The storm hit harder, sand stinging his eyes like angry wasps. His horse, a sturdy bay gelding named Scout, snorted and turned his rump to the wind. Matt patted the animal's neck, then packed his surveying chains back in the saddlebags. No use fighting nature when she got her dander up. By the time he made it back to his cabin, the storm had scoured every exposed inch of skin raw. He unsaddled Scout in the lean-to stable, making sure the horse had water and grain before heading inside. The cabin wasn't much, 2 rooms built solid from local stone, a fireplace that drew clean, and furniture he'd knocked together from salvaged lumber. But it was his. Every board and nail bought honest. Matt hung his dust-caked coat on a peg and noticed the pile of mending he'd left on the table. His shirts were getting threadbare, and that tear in his good pants had grown past what he could fix with his clumsy needle. Mrs. Zhao at the general store had mentioned a new seamstress in town, a young widow named Hart who did fine work for fair prices. Maybe it was time to pay her a visit. He heated leftover beans and cornbread for supper, ate standing at the window watching the storm blow itself out. As darkness fell, the wind died to a whisper, leaving the world coated in fresh dust like brown snow. Stars began to poke through the clearing sky, cold and distant as always. The next morning dawned clear and still. Matt loaded his mending into a canvas sack and rode the 3 miles to Dry Creek proper. The town hugged both sides of the creek that gave it its name, though calling that trickle of water a creek was being generous most months. False-fronted buildings lined the Main Street Zhao's general store, the Dusty Dollar Saloon, Doc Whitcomb's surgery, and a handful of other establishments trying to look more prosperous than they were. He found the seamstress shop tucked between the barber and the land office, just a small sign reading Hart's Mending and Laundry in neat painted letters. When he pushed through the door, a bell tinkled overhead. The woman behind the counter looked up from her work, and Matt found himself momentarily struck dumb. She wasn't beautiful in the painted lady way of saloon girls, but there was something about her that made a man look twice. Maybe it was the way she held herself, straight-backed despite the obvious weariness in her green eyes, or how her hands never stopped moving, fingers dancing over fabric with the kind of precision he recognized from his own careful work. "Help you?" she asked. Her voice carried a faint Irish lilt, mostly worn away, but still there in the vowels. "Got some mending needs doing." Matt set his bundle on the counter. "Mrs. Zhao said you do good work." She unwrapped the clothes, examining each piece with those clever fingers. No wedding ring, he noticed, though a pale band of skin suggested one had been there once. When she quoted her prices, they were fair as promised, maybe even a touch low. "When do you need them?" "No real rush, week or so." She nodded, making notes in a small ledger. "Name?" "Matthew Pike. Got a place out at Pike's Bend." Something flickered in her eyes, recognition worry, but it passed quick. "I'll have them ready Friday." Their business done. Matt should have left. Instead, he found himself lingering. "That's fine stitching," he said, nodding at the shirt she'd been working on. "Learned from my mother that good seams are straight seams." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Your mother was a wise woman, Mr. Pike." He touched his hat and left, bell tinkling his departure. Outside, Deputy Sheriff Silas Crane lounged against a post, picking his teeth with a splinter of wood. The man's badge caught the morning sun, winking like a snake's eye. "Morning, Pike," Crane drawled. "Heard you been surveying out at the bend again. My land. Like to keep my markers current." "Smart man." Crane's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Course, smart men also know when to sell. Railroad's coming through eventually. Might be some folks interested in that water access you got?" "Might be I'm not interested in selling." Crane shrugged, still smiling that cold smile. "Things change. Man alone out there, no family, no help accidents happen. Wouldn't want to see you end up like old Weber." Weber had been found dead in his cabin last winter, officially of natural causes. Funny how natural causes had left bruises shaped like fingers on his throat. Funnier still how his land had been sold for back taxes within a week, Crane himself handling the transaction. Matt kept his voice level. "Appreciate the concern. Deputy, I'll keep it in mind." He mounted Scout and rode out, feeling Crane's eyes on his back the whole way. The man was trouble looking for a place to happen, and Matt had a feeling that place might be Pike's Bend. The rest of the week passed quiet. Matt worked his small herd of cattle, mended fences, and checked the water levels in his spring. The underground stream that fed it ran deep and constant, the real treasure of his land, even in the worst droughts. Pike's Bend had water. Come Friday, he rode back to town. The afternoon sun beat down fierce, and he was grateful for the shade of the seamstress shop. Mrs. Hart had his clothes ready as promised, each piece mended so neat you'd have to look close to see where the tears had been. "Fine work," he said, paying what he owed. "You do leather too, got a saddle needs some attention." "I can manage leather." She wrapped his clothes in brown paper, tying the bundle with string. Her movements were quick and sure, but he noticed how her eyes kept darting to the window, watching the street. "Everything all right, ma'am?" She stiffened. "Fine. Just Deputy Crane's been by several times, making sure I have proper licenses and such." Matt's jaw tightened. Crane only checked licenses when he wanted something. "He giving you trouble?" "Nothing I can't handle." But her fingers trembled slightly as she handed him his package. That evening, Matt couldn't shake his unease. Something about the woman's nervousness, the way she'd looked ready to bolt at any loud noise. He'd seen that look before. During the war, people who'd been hunted wore it like a second skin. The storm that blew in after midnight made his decision for him. This wasn't the usual dust devil, but a real tempest, the kind that could turn deadly fast. Lightning cracked the sky, and thunder shook his cabin walls. Rain came in sheets, turning dust to mud in minutes. He thought of Mrs. Hart in town, probably safe in whatever boarding house room she rented. Then he remembered Weber's widow, how she disappeared one night in weather like this, found her body come spring, washed up in a gully 10 miles from town. Another accident. Crane had said. Matt saddled Scout despite the horse's protests. Maybe he was being foolish, but his gut said otherwise. He'd learned to trust his gut during 3 years of scouting for the cavalry. Town was dark except for the saloon, where yellow light spilled from windows onto the muddy street. He'd planned to check Mrs. Zhao's boarding house first, but movement near the old Benson place caught his eye. The sheep ranch had been abandoned 2 years back when Benson died of fever, leaving nothing but empty buildings slowly going to ruin. A figure struggled through the mud. Too small to be Mrs. Hart, but moving with purpose toward the old sheep barn. Matt followed at a distance, keeping Scout quiet. Lightning flashed, illuminating the scene for a heartbeat a child, maybe 10 or 12, dragging a bucket of water. Matt tied Scout to a broken fence post and approached on foot, through gaps in the barn's warped boards. He saw lamplight. He eased around to where a door hung crooked on its hinges, peering through the gap. His breath caught. Mrs. Hart knelt beside a makeshift pallet where a smaller child lay covered in thin blankets. A third child, the one with the bucket, set it down beside her. The barn had been transformed into a crude home, salvaged boards forming walls between sheep pens. A tiny camp stove in one corner, clothes hanging from ropes strung between posts. Jessie's fever's worse, the older child said. A girl, Matt realized, though she wore boys' clothes and had her hair tucked under a cap. I know, Molly. Mrs. Hart wrung out a cloth in the bucket, placing it on the sick child's forehead. But we can't fetch the doctor, not yet. Because of him, that deputy. Because of many things. Now help me get some willow bark tea into Jessie. Matt must have made a sound because Mrs. Hart's head snapped up, in one smooth motion. She had a small knife in her hand, pushing the children behind her. Who's there? He stepped into the doorway, hands visible and empty. It's Matthew Pike. Ma'am, didn't mean to frighten you. She didn't lower the knife. What are you doing here? Storm worried me. Wanted to make sure you were all right. He gestured at the barn around them. Guess I was right to worry. We're fine. You can go. The sick child, Jessie, whimpered, and Molly pressed closer to Mrs. Hart sighed. A third child Matt hadn't noticed, a boy maybe 9, appeared from the shadows holding a piece of wood like a club. That's Seamus. Mrs. Hart said quietly. Put it down. Boy, Mr. Pike's not here to hurt us. Matt crouched slowly, making himself smaller. Jessie needs a doctor. Ma'am, Doc Whitcomb's discreet. He won't ask questions. Can't afford questions or doctors. But he saw her resolve wavering as Jessie coughed, a harsh sound in the drafty barn. I'll pay, and I'll make sure Crane doesn't know. She studied him for a long moment. Why would you do that? Because it's right. And because I've got a feeling Crane's the reason you're hiding out here instead of living proper in town. Something in her face crumbled. The knife disappeared back into her skirts, and she nodded. Molly, get Mr. Pike's horse out of the storm. Seamus, stoke the stove. We'll need more hot water. While the children worked, Matt got his first good look at their situation. It was worse than he'd thought. Everything they had was salvaged or makeshift. The floor was dirt covered with old feed sacks. Their food stores, what little he could see, wouldn't last another week. How long have you been out here? 2 months. Mrs. Hart didn't look at him, focused on Jessie. Since we arrived in Dry Creek. And the children? My brother and sister, and Jessie. Jessie I found in Denver. No one wanted a sick Irish orphan. So you took them all and ran? Her chin came up defiant. Wouldn't you if the alternative was watching them separated and sent to workhouses or worse? Matt thought of the notices he'd seen posted around town lately. Children's Aid Society looking for vagrant youth to be properly placed. He'd never paid them much mind before. I would, he said quietly. But you can't keep them safe living like this. Jessie needs medicine and proper food. You all do. I'm managing. No, ma'am, you're surviving. There's a difference. Before she could respond, Jessie's coughing worsened. The child was burning up, lips cracked with fever. Matt made a decision. I'm fetching Doc Whitcomb. Lock the door behind me if it makes you feel safer, but I'm coming back with help. He left before she could protest, riding hard through the storm. Doc Whitcomb answered his door in a nightshirt, grumbling until Matt explained. The old doctor's face went grim. Jessie Hart, that the child Crane's been asking about, claims the boy was kidnapped from some important family back east. Don't know about that. Just know there's a sick child needs help. Doc gathered his bag. Crane's been spreading poison about that woman since she arrived. Says she's a thief and worse. But I've got eyes I see how she works herself raw to feed those children. They rode back together, Doc handling the storm like the old campaigner he was. Mrs. Hart let them in reluctantly. But once Doc started examining Jessie, her wariness dissolved into desperate hope. A lung fever, Doc pronounced. Serious but treatable if we act fast. I've got medicine that'll help. While Doc worked, Matt found himself herding the other 2 children closer to the stove. Molly watched him with eyes too old for her face. while Seamus clutched a ragged book looked like a primer, the kind used for learning letters. "You been teaching them?" he asked Mrs. Hart. "When I can. Education's the only way they'll have better." Doc finished dosing Jesse and pulled Matt aside. "Child needs proper shelter and food to recover. This barn'll be the death of all of them come winter." "I know." Matt made another decision. Probably foolish, but necessary. "I've got an old line shack on my property. Solid walls, good stove. They could use it. And when Crane comes looking, let him look. It's my land. I can have whoever I want on it." Mrs. Hart overheard. "We can't accept." "You can and you will." Matt kept his voice gentle but firm. "Pride's cold comfort when children are hungry. You can work off the rent if it makes you feel better. Lord knows I need help with mending and such." She looked at her siblings, at Jesse fighting for breath, and nodded once. "Just until we're back on our feet." "Of course." They moved that very night, using Matt's wagon despite the storm. By dawn, the Hart family was installed in the line shack, not fancy, but weathertight and warm. Jesse's breathing had eased with Doc's medicine, and the other children wolfed down the simple breakfast Matt cobbled together from his supplies. As he prepared to leave for his own cabin, Mrs. Hart stopped him at the door. "Why are you doing this, really?" Matt thought about it. "My wife died 3 years back. Fever took her while I was off playing soldier. I couldn't save her. Maybe I can't save anyone, but I can try to do right when I see wrong being done." She nodded slowly. "Lila? My name's Lila." "Matt! Just Matt!" He left them settling in, but not before nailing a paper to the door, a work contract, all legal and proper. Hiring one L, Hart as seamstress and general help. Let Crane try to call her a vagrant now. Riding back to his cabin as the sun broke through the clouds, Matt wondered what he'd just gotten himself into. But when he thought of those children warm and safe instead of huddled in a drafty barn, he couldn't regret it. The dust from yesterday's storm had settled, leaving the world washed clean and new. Maybe that was a sign. Maybe some things could be made right after all. He'd left flour, beans, and bacon at the line shack, along with a note, "For services to be rendered, MEP." He knew pride would make her want to refuse, but need would make her accept. And maybe, just maybe, they could all find a way forward that didn't involve running or hiding or being alone. The underground spring on his land bubbled up clear and constant, feeding the small creek that gave his bend its value. Water in the desert, life in a hard place. Sometimes that's all anyone needed, a chance to put down roots where sustenance could be found. Matt unsaddled Scout and set to his daily chores, but his mind kept drifting to the line shack and its new occupants. Trouble was coming, he could feel it like pressure before a storm. Crane wouldn't let this go easy. But for now, there were 3 children and 1 stubborn woman with a chance at something better than bare survival. It wasn't much, but it was a start. And sometimes a start was all you needed to change everything. The line shack transformed over the next 2 weeks like desert ground after rare rain. Where bare walls had stood, now hung carefully mended curtains Lila had sewn from flour sacks. The rickety table Matt had knocked together years ago bore a cloth covering, and wildflowers picked by Molly brightened the window sill in a cracked mason jar. Matt stopped by every other day, bringing supplies he claimed were extra from his stores. Lila never challenged the lie directly, but she kept careful account in a small ledger, marking down every pound of flour, every tin of peaches, every bit of salt pork. "I'll work it off," she said each time, and each time Matt nodded, knowing she would. Jesse's recovery came slow but steady. The boy Matt learned he was 6, small for his age, spoke little but watched everything with dark, solemn eyes. When Matt carved a wooden horse from a piece of juniper, Jesse clutched it tight and offered the ghost of a smile. "He hasn't talked much since Denver," Lila explained one evening while the children played outside in the cooling air. "What he saw there, no child should see such things." Matt didn't press. He'd seen enough of the world to know that sometimes silence was a mercy. The work arrangement settled into a rhythm. Lila took in mending and washing from town, while Matt hired her to help with various tasks around his property. She proved capable at more than just needlework. She could handle basic carpentry, knew her way around livestock, and had a sharp eye for detail that complemented his surveying work. "Where'd you learn to read terrain like that?" he asked one afternoon as she helped him map a new section of the property. "My father was a surveyor back in County Cork. Before—" She trailed off, that familiar shadow crossing her face. "Before we had to leave." Matt understood about befores that couldn't be spoken. His own lived in the scars on his back and the dreams that woke him sweating in the dark. The first real test came on a market day in town. Matt had convinced Lila to bring her mending to Mrs. Zhao's store, where she could work in the back room while folks dropped off their clothes. It would save her the long walks and give her a chance to establish herself as a proper businesswoman. They were loading the wagon when Seamus came running, face flushed with panic. "Molly's at the creek. She fell in." Matt was moving before the boy finished speaking. The creek ran high this time of year, fed by mountain snowmelt. Its current could knock a grown man off his feet, let alone a 12-year-old girl. He heard her before he saw her frightened cries carrying over the water's roar. She'd been swept 20 yards downstream, clinging to a dead cottonwood branch that jutted from the bank. The branch was bending, ready to snap. Matt didn't hesitate. He plunged into the icy water, fighting the current that tried to spin him like a leaf. His boots found purchase on the rocky bottom as he worked his way toward her. "Hold on, Molly, don't let go." The girl's face was white with cold and fear, but she nodded, jaw set with the same determination he'd seen in her sister. Matt reached her just as the branch cracked. He caught her around the waist, pulling her against him as the current tried to tear them both away. "I've got you. Wrap your arms around my neck." She did, clinging tight as he fought their way back to shore. His muscles burned with the effort, and twice he nearly lost his footing. But then Lila was there, waist deep in the water, reaching for them. Together they hauled Molly onto dry ground. The girl was sobbing now, the brave facade crumbling. Lila wrapped her in her shawl, holding her close while murmuring soothing words in Irish. Matt sat on the bank, catching his breath, and found Seamus and Jessie staring at him with wide eyes. "You saved her," Jessie whispered. It was the most Matt had heard him speak. Anyone would have done the same. "No," Lila said quietly, looking at him over Molly's head. "They wouldn't have—" That evening, after Molly had been warmed and fed and fussed over by Doc Whitcomb, Lila found Matt sitting on his porch, watching the sun paint the mountains gold. "I owe you." "You owe me nothing." He cut her off, gentle but firm. "We look after each other out here. That's how it works." She sat beside him, maintaining a proper distance but close enough that he caught the scent of lye soap and lavender. "Still, Molly's all the mother those boys remember. If we'd lost her—" "We didn't. That's what matters." They sat in companionable silence until the first stars appeared. Then Lila stood, smoothing her skirts. "I should get back, but Matt, thank you for everything." After she left, Matt sat alone, trying not to think about how right it had felt to hear her say his name. The flash flood hit 3 days later. Matt woke to the sound of water where no water should be. He rolled from bed, grabbing his boots, and stumbled outside to see a wall of muddy water rushing down the usually dry arroyo that cut through his eastern pasture. Mountain storm, he realized, miles away. Rain had fallen hard and fast, gathering strength as it rushed downhill. Now all that water was heading straight for the line shack. He was on scout and riding hard before full thought formed. The shack sat on high ground, but the access trail dipped through a low wash. If that filled, they'd be cut off. He heard the roar before he saw it, water churning brown and angry, carrying debris like battering rams. The wash was already half full and rising. On the far side, He could see Lila herding the children to higher ground behind the shack. But Jesse had frozen, standing in the path of the water, clutching his wooden horse. Matt didn't remember dismounting or entering the water. One moment he was on scout, the next he was scooping up the boy just as a wall of muddy foam crashed over them. The force drove him to his knees, water filling his mouth and nose. He held Jesse high, using his body as a shield against the debris. Something struck his ribs, a log or branch sending fire through his side. But he kept his feet, stumbling toward the far bank where Lila was reaching, screaming words the water swallowed. Hands pulled at him, Lila and Molly together, dragging them clear as the flood crested. Matt collapsed on dry ground. Jesse still clutched in his arms. The boy was crying, which meant he was breathing, which was all that mattered. "Are you hurt, Matt? Answer me." Lila's hands moved over him, checking for injuries with surprising gentleness. "Just bruised?" He sat up, wincing at the pain in his ribs. Everyone accounted for. "We're all here, but Matt, your side." He looked down to see blood seeping through his shirt. The debris had done more than bruise. Lila was already tearing strips from her petticoat, pressing them against the wound. "It's not deep," she said, but her face was pale. "Though you'll need stitches. You any good with a needle on something besides cloth?" Despite everything, she almost smiled. "I've had practice." They waited out the flood in the shack. Matt propped against the wall while Lila cleaned and stitched the gash with steady hands. The children huddled close, Jesse refusing to let go of Matt's hand. "I dropped my horse," the boy whispered. "We'll make another," Matt promised, "even better than the first." By afternoon, the water had receded enough to reveal the damage. The wash would be impassable for days, leaving them effectively stranded. Matt's fence was gone, and several cattle had been swept away, but they were alive. "We can't stay here," Lila said as they surveyed the mess. "Not with you hurt and no way to get to town." "Main cabin's sturdy. Room enough for everyone until we can clear the trail." She looked ready to protest, then nodded. "Just until the water goes down." They made the trek slowly, Matt leaning on a makeshift crutch while Scout carried Jesse. The cabin seemed to embrace them, solid walls promising safety after the morning's terror. Matt showed them the small back room he used for storage. "Not fancy, but it'll do for the children. You can have my bed. I'll take the floor by the fire." "You'll do no such thing with those ribs. We'll make do in here together." That night, with the children fed and sleeping, Matt and Lila sat by the fire. The day's events had stripped away some invisible barrier between them. When she shivered, he draped a blanket around her shoulders, letting his hand linger a moment on the worn fabric. "In Denver," she said suddenly, "Jesse saw his parents die. Fever took them, but not quick. He watched them fade over weeks, tried to care for them himself. He was 5. Matt said nothing, just listened. "When I found him, he was living in an alley, eating scraps. The authorities wanted to send him to an asylum, said he was too damaged for regular placement." Her voice carried old anger, as if being hurt meant he deserved to be thrown away. "Is that why you ran?" "Partly. My late husband, had debts. After he died, collectors came calling. They had legal claim to everything, including decisions about Molly and Seamus. One man offered to forgive the debt if I was accommodating." Matt's hands clenched. He knew the type of man she meant. "So I took what little money I had hidden, gathered the children, and left. Found Jesse along the way and couldn't leave him." She stared into the fire. "Deputy Crane reminds me of those collectors. Same eyes, same smile." "He won't touch you here," Matt said quietly. "Any of you." "You can't promise that." "Watch me." She turned to look at him then, firelight catching the green of her eyes. "Why do you care what happens to us?" Matt considered his words carefully. "My wife, Sarah, she used to say the world was divided into those who build and those who tear down. She was a builder. made our little soddy into a home, turned hard ground into a garden. When the fever took her, I stopped building, just existed." He paused, gathering courage. "Then you showed up, turning a line shack into a home, fighting for those children, building something from nothing. Made me remember why building matters." Lila's hand found his, a brief touch that burned more than any wound. "We should sleep. Tomorrow will bring its own troubles." But she didn't move away immediately, and neither did he. They sat watching the fire die to embers, hands almost touching, while somewhere outside a coyote called to its mate and the world turned toward dawn. The next morning brought Silas Crane. Matt was teaching Seamus to mend harness when the deputy rode up, badge glinting and smile wide as a snake's. 2 men flanked him, strangers with the hard look of hired muscle. "Morning, Pike. Heard you had some trouble with flooding." "News travels fast." "It does indeed. Also heard you've been harboring fugitives." Matt set down the leather, moving careful with his injured ribs. "No fugitives here, just my employees." "That's so." Crane dismounted, hand resting on his pistol. "Because I've got papers here saying one Lila Hart absconded with minors not her own. Makes her a kidnapper under territorial law. Those children are her siblings. 2 of them, maybe, but the boy no blood relation, and without proper guardianship papers." Crane's smile widened. "Well, that's a serious crime." Lila appeared in the doorway, face pale but chin high. "Jesse's parents asked me to care for him, their dying wish." "You got witnesses to that legal documentation because I've got a telegram from the Children's Aid Society saying different." Matt stepped between them. "You've delivered your message. Deputy, now get off my land." Crane's eyes narrowed. "Careful. Pike, you're walking close to obstruction of justice. Man in your position. With land this valuable, be a shame if something happened." "Is that a threat?" "Just friendly advice." Crane remounted, tipping his hat mockingly at Lila. "Ma'am, you've got 1 week to produce legal guardianship papers for all 3 children. Otherwise, I'll have to take them into protective custody, for their own good. You understand?" They watched him ride away, dust rising like smoke signals of trouble to come. "A week," Lila whispered. "How can I get papers in a week? I don't even know Jesse's real surname." Matt's mind was already working. "Doc Whitcomb might know someone, and Mrs. Zhao has connections through her merchant networks. We'll figure it out." She looked at him with a mixture of hope and fear. "Matt, this isn't your fight. You've done enough." "It became my fight the moment I pulled you out of that barn." He gentled his voice. "We'll figure it out. Lila, together." That night, Jesse crept to Matt's chair by the fire, wooden horse clutched tight. "Are they going to take me away?" Matt lifted the boy onto his lap, feeling the bird bone lightness of him. "Not if I can help it, partner. Promise." Matt thought of all the promises he'd failed to keep, all the people he'd failed to save, but looking into Jesse's trusting eyes, he couldn't do anything but nod. "I promise." From across the room, Lila watched them with an expression Matt couldn't quite read, but when their eyes met, she nodded once, a battlefield acknowledgement between allies. They had a week to fight paper with paper, to build legal walls as strong as the physical ones sheltering them now. Matt didn't know if it would be enough, but like Lila with her flour sack curtains and wildflower jars, they'd make something from nothing. They'd build. It's what builders did. The week Crane had given them passed in a blur of desperate activity. Matt rode to Cheyenne, burning through 2 horses to meet with a lawyer who owed him a favor from the war. The man listened, shook his head, and delivered the truth like a bullet without documentation or witnesses. Jesse's case was near hopeless. "Best I can do is file for temporary custody pending a full hearing." The lawyer said, "Buy you time, maybe, but Crane's got the law on his side." Matt returned to find Lila teaching the children their letters by lamplight, her voice steady despite the shadows under her eyes. She'd been working 18-hour days, taking in every piece of mending in town to raise money for legal fees. "Any luck?" she asked quietly after the children had bedded down. "Some, not enough." He explained about the temporary custody filing. "We need witnesses who knew Jesse's parents, or documents proving their wishes." "Denver's a long way, and I don't even know their full names. Just Tom and Mary. He called himself Tom the Baker because that's what he did." She rubbed her eyes. "I should have asked more questions. Should have gotten papers." "You saved his life. That matters more than papers." But they both knew the law didn't see it that way. The next morning brought a new complication. Ephraim Barlow, the territory's largest landowner, paid a visit with 3 of his men. Matt knew him by reputation, a man who collected land like some collected scalps, and just as ruthless about it. "Mr. Pike." Barlow didn't dismount, looking down from his thoroughbred like a king surveying peasants. "I hear you've been having difficulties." "Nothing I can't handle." Perhaps not. Barlow's pale eyes shifted to where Lila was hanging wash, the children helping. "Unfortunate situation with the woman. Crane tells me she's likely to lose those children." Matt said nothing, waiting. "I might be persuaded to intervene. I have influence with certain judges. A word from me could resolve her difficulties. In exchange for—" Barlow smiled thin as paper. "Your water rights, sell me the bend, and I'll ensure Mrs. Hart keeps her family together." The offer hung between them like a poison apple. Matt's land for the children's future. He thought of the promise he'd made Jesse, the trust in the boy's eyes. "I'll need to think on it." "Of course. But don't think too long. Crane's patience has limits." Barlow turned his horse. "Oh, and Pike, that surveying work you've been doing very thorough. My compliments." After they left, Matt found his hands shaking with rage. They'd been watching him, mapping his land using his own careful work against him. That evening, Doc Whitcomb stopped by with disturbing news. "Crane's been spreading word that Mrs. Hart's touched in the head, says she kidnapped those children, that she's delusional, dangerous even, getting folks stirred up." "That's a lie." Molly burst out from where she'd been listening. "Lila saved us. Our own father's cousin was going to sell us for servants." Doc's eyes sharpened. "Sell you?" The girl clapped a hand over her mouth, looking terrified. Lila went white. "It's all right," Matt said gently. "Doc's trustworthy. Tell him." The story came out in pieces. Their parents dead of ship fever, arriving in New York, a cousin who'd promised to care for them but saw only free labor. Lila working in a factory, sending every penny home until she discovered the truth. Her escape with the children, the dangerous journey west. "So you see," Lila finished quietly. "I did take them without legal right, but leaving them would have been worse." Doc was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I knew your father in Cork, worked on a canal project together before I studied medicine." Lila's head snapped up. "You knew, Da?" "Aye. Good man, honest as they come. He'd have been proud. You protecting the young ones." Doc stood. "I'll write a statement. Won't carry legal weight, but it's something." After Doc left, Matt noticed Seamus working on something at the table papers covered with careful lettering. "What's that, boy?" "Our story." Seamus said fierce. "Everything true. Written down. How Lila saved us. How she worked so hard. How she teaches us right from wrong." He looked up with eyes too old for 9 years. "Maybe if the judge reads it, he'll understand." Matt's throat tightened. "That's good thinking, partner." But privately, he doubted a child's letter would sway territorial law. They needed something more. The answer came from an unexpected source. Mrs. Zhao arrived the next day with tea and information. "I have been making inquiries through my merchant associations," she said in her precise English. "There is a baker in Denver named Thomas Pilecki. Polish man. Died of fever last year with his wife Maria. they had a young son. Lila gripped the table. That could be them. Tom's accent, I thought it was German, but Polish. I have sent telegrams to my associates. If we can prove Jesse is their son, and that they knew you. Mrs. Zhao spread her hands. It is slim hope, but hope nonetheless. Matt felt a surge of admiration for the quiet shopkeeper. What do you need from us? Money for telegrams, and perhaps... She looked at Lila. Any detail you remember? What they looked like, what Tom baked, anything Jesse might have said. They spent hours reconstructing memories. Jesse sitting silent in Lila's lap, occasionally nodding when something sounded right. He remembered his father's big hands covered in flour, his mother singing while she worked. Small things, but maybe enough. 3 days before Crane's deadline, everything went wrong at once. Matt woke to find his fence cut and 20 head of cattle missing. Clear tracks led toward Barlow's land, but proving it was another matter. While he was surveying the damage, smoke rose from the direction of town. He rode hard, fear clenching his gut. The smoke came from behind Zhao's store. Someone had set fire to her storage shed. By the time they got it under control, most of her merchant records were ash. All my correspondence, she said, staring at the ruins. The contacts in Denver, gone. It wasn't hard to guess who was behind it. Crane stood across the street, watching with that snake smile. When he caught Matt's eye, he touched his hat in mock salute. That night, Matt made his decision. He found Lila mending by lamplight, the children asleep. I'm going to take Barlow's deal. Her needle stopped. No. It's the only way. The land for the children's safety. I won't let you sacrifice everything for us. She set down her sewing, eyes blazing. We're not your responsibility, Matt Pike. Aren't you? The words came out rougher than intended. You think I could live with myself, watching them torn away, watching you? He stopped, but too late. Watching me, what? Her voice was soft now, dangerous. Watching you break, because it would break you, Lila, and that would break me too. They stared at each other across the lamplight. Then Lila stood, crossed to him, and did something unexpected. She slapped him. Don't you dare, she said fierce. Don't you dare give up. We fight, Matt. That's what we do. We fight with everything we have until we can't fight anymore. He caught her hand before she could pull back. And when fighting's not enough, then we fight harder. Her eyes filled but didn't overflow. Please, 3 more days. Give me 3 more days. Against his better judgment, he nodded. The preliminary hearing was set for the Dry Creek Town Hall, a grand name for a building that usually hosted dances and penny socials. Judge Tobias Morton, circuit judge for the territory, was a fair man by reputation, but he was also a stickler for the law. The night before, none of them slept much. Matt found Jesse on the porch at dawn, clutching his wooden horse. You scared, partner? The boy nodded. Will you be there? Every minute. And if they take me, Matt knelt to Jesse's level. Then I'll come get you. Might take time, but I'll come. That's a promise. Jesse studied him with those 2 old eyes. Then he held out the wooden horse. Keep this safe. Matt's throat closed. He tucked the horse in his shirt pocket. Safe as houses. The hearing drew a crowd. Seemed everyone in Dry Creek had an opinion about the foreign woman and her questionable children. Crane had done his work well, poisoning the water of public opinion. Judge Morton called order, his gavel sharp as a rifle crack. He was a spare man with clever eyes that missed nothing, including the way Crane's hired men positioned themselves around the room. The deputy presented his case with oily efficiency. Lila Hart, no legal standing. The children, especially Jesse, held without proper authority. The danger to moral standards, allowing such irregular arrangements. The territory has standards. Crane concluded, We're not the wild frontier anymore. We're civilized people with civilized laws. When Lila's turn came, she stood straight despite the hostile crowd. Matt had never been prouder of another human being. She told her story simple and clear. The dying parents, the request to care for Jesse, the journey west, the work to keep them fed and sheltered. Doc Whitcomb testified to her character, and even Deputy Nora Black, Crane's own subordinate, spoke carefully about Lila's obvious devotion to the children. Then Seamus stood, holding his written pages with shaking hands. "Please, Your Honor," I wrote down the truth. Morton's expression softened slightly. "Go ahead, son." Seamus read in a clear voice about their life before Lila, the cousin who saw them as property, the fear and hunger. He read about Lila teaching them letters by candlelight, going without food so they could eat, working until her fingers bled to keep them safe. "She's our sister," he finished. "But more than that, she's the one who stayed." Even some of Crane's supporters looked uncomfortable. But the law was the law. Morton cleared his throat. "While the court is moved by these testimonies, the fact remains that Mrs. Hart has no legal claim to the minor Jesse. Without documentation." "Your Honor," Nora Black stood suddenly. "I have something." Crane's face went dark. "Deputy Black, what are you—" "I have a telegram." She pulled a paper from her pocket. "Came this morning from Denver, from a Father Kowalski at St. Stanislaus Church." The room went silent as she read, "Thomas and Maria Pilecki, known as Tom and Mary Baker, died in my arms last September. Their final request was that their son Jesse be cared for by Miss Lila Hart, who had shown them Christian kindness in their illness. I witnessed this wish and recorded it in parish records. Will provide sworn statement if required." Morton leaned forward. "This telegram, it's genuine. Sent through official railroad telegraph, Your Honor. I verified it myself." Crane was on his feet. "This is irregular. The woman could have arranged—" "Sit down, Deputy." Morton's voice carried steel. "Deputy Black, why didn't this information come through normal channels?" Nora met his eyes steady. "Someone's been intercepting telegrams. Your Honor, I had to use alternative methods." The judge's gaze moved to Crane, who had gone pale. "I see. Well, this changes matters considerably. While not ideal, a deathbed wish witnessed by clergy carries weight." He deliberated for long minutes while the crowd held its breath. Finally, "It is the judgment of this court that temporary custody of all 3 minor children be granted to Miss Lila Hart, pending final review in 6 months. During that time, proper documentation should be obtained and filed." The gavel came down like salvation. What happened next was chaos. Crane shouted about corruption and conspiracy. Barlow's men moved toward the bench, but the townspeople, the same ones who'd whispered about the foreign woman, suddenly closed ranks. Mrs. Zhao stood first, then Doc, then others. Even some who'd supported Crane seemed to remember that they too had come west, seeking second chances. "Court dismissed," Morton said firmly. "Deputy Crane, a word in private about these intercepted telegrams." Outside, Lila stood in the sunshine holding the children, tears running free. Matt stayed back, letting them have their moment, but Jesse broke away, running to throw his arms around Matt's waist. "You kept your promise," the boy whispered. Over Jesse's head, Matt met Lila's eyes. She crossed to them, pulled Matt down, and kissed his cheek, quick and fierce and in full view of half the town. "Thank you," she whispered, "for not giving up." That evening, they returned to the cabin to find Barlow waiting, no longer smiling. "You've won this round, Pike, but the railroad's coming whether you like it or not. Your water rights are mine," Matt said evenly, "and will stay mine." "We'll see." Barlow's eyes were cold as winter stone. Crane was a fool, but he was right about one thing. This territory's changing, no room for irregular arrangements anymore. After he left, Matt stood looking at his land, seeing it with new eyes, the survey markers he'd so carefully placed. The maps he'd drawn, all of it, could be used against him now. But inside the cabin, he could hear Lila helping with lessons, Molly laughing at something Seamus said, Jesse's quiet voice slowly learning to trust again. Land was just dirt and water and grass. This was worth fighting for. Storms coming, Lila said, joining him on the porch. She'd meant the weather, clouds building over the mountains. But they both heard the deeper meaning. Let it come, Matt said. We'll weather it. She slipped her hand into his. First time she'd done so in daylight. Together. Together. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and the first drops of rain began to fall. But they stayed on the porch, hands linked, watching the storm approach. Whatever came next, they'd face it as they'd faced everything else, building something strong enough to last. The underground spring bubbled eternal beneath their feet, fed by sources deeper than any map could show, like hope, like love, like family chosen and fought for and held. Water in the desert, life in a hard place. Sometimes that was enough to change everything. April arrived with a vengeance, bringing the kind of unseasonable blizzard that reminded folks why the Wyoming Territory had broken so many spirits before it ever broke ground. The snow started gentle enough on a Tuesday evening, fat flakes drifting down like ash from some distant fire. By Wednesday noon, it had become a white wall of fury that swallowed the world. Matt had seen the signs, the way the cattle bunched nervous in the lee of the barn, how the air tasted metallic and wrong. He'd spent the morning moving what stock he could to shelter, but 20 head were still scattered across the north pasture when the real storm hit. Let them be, Lila said when he reached for his coat. No animal's worth your life. But those cattle represented months of work, the slim profit margin that kept the ranch afloat. I'll just push them toward the draw. There's shelter there. Then I'm coming with you. Oh, like hell you are. She was already wrapping herself in layers, that stubborn set to her jaw he'd come to know well. 2 can move them faster than 1. The children will be fine. Molly knows to keep the fire going. There was no arguing with her when she got that look. They ventured into the white blindness together, rope tied between them like mountaineers, following the fence line by feel. The cattle were exactly where he'd feared, bunched against the north fence where the wind hit hardest, too panicked to find shelter on their own. Ice crusted their hides, and 2 yearlings were already down, snow drifting over their still forms. Working together, they got the survivors moving, Matt on horseback pushing from behind while Lila led on foot, her voice somehow cutting through the wind's howl. It took 2 hours to move them a quarter mile, fighting for every yard. They'd almost reached the draw when Matt heard it, the crack of breaking wood sharp as a rifle shot. A cottonwood, heavy with ice, was coming down directly above Lila. He spurred Scout forward, leaning down to grab her around the waist, hauling her up and across his saddle as the tree crashed where she'd been standing. They tumbled together into the snow, Scout dancing away from the fallen giant. For a moment they lay tangled, faces inches apart, breathing hard. Snow melted on her cheeks like tears, and her green eyes were wide with what might have been fear or something else entirely. You're making a habit of saving my life, Matthew Pike. You're making a habit of needing it. She laughed, surprising them both, and he helped her stand. They finished pushing the cattle into the shelter of the draw, then fought their way back through a world gone white and wild. By the time they stumbled through the cabin door, they were both half frozen. The children fussed over them, bringing hot coffee and blankets while the storm raged outside. Jesse climbed into Matt's lap, still clutching the new wooden horse he'd carved, while Molly and Seamus peppered them with questions about the cattle. We saved most of them, Lila said, her voice hoarse from shouting over the wind. Thanks to Matt. Thanks to both of us, he corrected. Made a good team out there. Their eyes met over Jesse's head, and something passed between them, acknowledgement of more than just the day's work. The storm lasted 3 days. By the time it blew itself out, Dry Creek was buried under 4 feet of snow, with drifts up to the roof lines. The unexpected blizzard had caught everyone off guard. Food supplies, already thin from a hard winter, dwindled fast. Matt opened his root cellar and smokehouse without hesitation. "Take what you need," he told the neighbors who came trudging through the snow. "We'll settle accounts when the thaw comes." "That's half your winter stores," Lila said quietly after the third family left with laden sleds. "And they've got children to feed. We'll manage." She studied him with that direct gaze. "Sarah must have been a lucky woman, married to a man like you." It was the first time she'd mentioned his wife voluntary. Matt felt something loosen in his chest, a knot he'd carried so long he'd forgotten it was there. "I wasn't always. Got better at it too late." He looked out where Seamus was teaching Jesse to build a snow fort. "Maybe that's why I get a second chance at doing right." Word spread about Matt opening his stores. Mrs. Jaw, whose own supplies were running low after the fire, came with a proposal. "I have connections with merchants in Laramie, but the roads are impassable. If someone could break trail—" "I'll go," Matt said immediately. "Take a pack string. Bring back supplies for the whole town. The danger is worth it if folks don't starve." 2 days later, he set out with 4 pack horses and Scout, breaking trail through chest-deep snow. Lila watched from the porch, Jessie in her arms, saying nothing but everything written on her face. The journey to Laramie took 5 days instead of the usual 2. Matt fought through drifts, dug out the horses when they foundered, slept cold and ate colder. But he made it, loaded the pack horses with flour, beans, salt pork, and medicine, and started back. He was a day out from Dry Creek when he found the overturned wagon. It lay on its side in a gulch, wheels reaching toward the sky like dying hands. A woman crouched beside it, trying to dig someone out from underneath with bare hands already turning blue. Matt slid down the slope, leading the pack string. "Ma'am, let me help." She turned a tear-streaked face toward him, young, maybe 20, with the kind of desperate fear he'd seen too often. "My husband, the wagon tipped, please." Together they dug, Matt using a shovel from his pack. The man underneath was alive but badly hurt, leg bent at an angle that made Matt's stomach turn. They got him free, the woman cradling his head while Matt splinted the leg best he could. "We were heading to Dry Creek," she gasped through chattering teeth. "Henry heard there was work at the railroad camp. We've got nothing left, sold everything for this wagon and supplies," which were now scattered across the gulch, ruined by snow and the accident. Matt made a decision. Can he ride? "I think so, if we go slow." Matt redistributed the supplies, making room on the pack horses. They put Henry on Scout, his wife walking beside to steady him, and began the slow journey to town. They reached Dry Creek after dark, going straight to Doc Whitcomb's. While Doc worked on Henry's leg, Matt learned their story. Henry and Beth Morrison, burned out by drought in Kansas, following rumors of work like so many others. Good people caught in bad circumstances. "They can stay in the old line shack," Matt told Doc, "until he's healed up." "That's Lila's place." She and the children are at the main cabin now. He didn't elaborate on that arrangement, but Doc's knowing smile said he didn't need to. When Matt finally made it home, he found a warm meal waiting and Lila pacing like a caged cat. 5 days? You were supposed to be gone 5 days. Not 7. "Ran into some trouble." He told her about the Morrisons while she fussed over his frostbitten fingers. "Hope you don't mind about the shack." "Mind, Matt. You gave away half your supplies to help strangers." "Of course I don't mind." She paused in wrapping his hands. "Though people will talk. Me living here unmarried." "Let them talk." But the next day, Lila moved back to the line shack with the children. "It's not proper," she said when he protested. "And with the Morrisons needing help, it makes sense for me to be there." Matt wanted to argue, but the stubborn set of her shoulders told him it would be useless. Instead, he helped them move. trying not to think about how empty the cabin would feel without Jesse's quiet presence or Molly's laughter. The spring thaw came hard and fast, turning snow to mud and streams to torrents. It also brought the railroad scouts back, surveying for the best route through the territory. Matt watched them work with growing unease, recognizing the same careful precision he brought to his own mapping. Crane, temporarily stripped of his badge pending investigation, had found new employment with the railroad company. He made sure Matt knew it, stopping by with 2 company men to deliver a message. "Railroad's definitely coming through Dry Creek," Crane said, his snake smile back in place. "Question is, will it benefit the town or bypass it entirely depends on cooperation from local landowners. Meaning your water rights at the Bend would make an ideal depot location. Companies prepared to make a generous offer. Not interested. You might want to reconsider. Railroads got federal backing now. Eminent domain laws can be flexible when progress is at stake." After they left, Matt found his hands shaking. Not from fear, but rage. They'd used the law itself as a weapon, twist it to take what they couldn't buy. That evening, he was checking his survey markers when he noticed something wrong. Several had been moved just slightly, but enough to shift his property lines if someone wanted to challenge them. His own careful work, corrupted and turned against him. He was still kneeling by a displaced marker when he heard horses approaching. His hand went to the rifle across his saddle, then relaxed as he recognized the riders. Lila on foot leading the Morrisons' plow horse. Molly and Beth Morrison riding, with Seamus and Jesse walking alongside. "Thought you might be hungry," Lila called out, holding up a basket. "Beth made her Kansas cornbread best you've ever tasted." They spread a blanket right there in the field, sharing the simple meal as the sun set over the mountains. Henry Morrison, legs still splinted but healing, had sent his thanks along with the bread. "He's a good carpenter," Beth said shyly. "Once he's healed, he wants to help rebuild from the storm damage, pay back folks' kindness." Matt felt something ease in his chest. This was what Crane and Barlow would never understand. Community wasn't about legal documents or property lines. It was about people choosing to help each other, to stand together against whatever came. As they packed up to leave, Jesse tugged on Matt's sleeve. Matt, will you teach me to survey like you so I can help?" "Sure, partner. Start tomorrow if you want." The boy's rare smile was worth more than any deed or title. But that night, alone in his empty cabin, Matt sat studying his maps by lamplight. Every line, every notation, every careful measurement, all of it could be used against him now. The very precision that had secured his claim might be what lost it. A soft knock interrupted his brooding. Lila stood on the porch, shawl wrapped tight against the chill. "Couldn't sleep," she said, kept thinking about what Crane said, about eminent domain. "It's not your worry." "Isn't it?" She moved past him into the cabin, gravitating toward the warmth of the fire. "Your land, your water, it's what's keeping all of us safe. The Morrisons, Mrs. Jow. Half the town after the storm. If they take the Bend, they won't." She turned to face him. "How can you be so sure?" Matt set down his maps, crossing to stand beside her. "Because I won't let them. Because this community won't let them. Because sometimes right matters more than legal. The world doesn't work that way. Then we make it work that way." He touched her shoulder. Gentle. "You taught me that. Fighting when fighting seems impossible." She leaned into his touch, just slightly. "I'm scared, Matt, for the children, for you, for all of us. Feels like standing in front of an avalanche with nothing but good intentions." Good intentions and good neighbors, and the most stubborn woman in the territory. That got a small laugh. "Second most stubborn. You've got me beat by miles." They stood together watching the fire burn low, not touching except for his hand on her shoulder, but connected by more than physical proximity. Outside, coyotes called across the darkness. and the wind carried the distant whistle of a train still far off, but coming. "I should go," Lila said finally. "Dawn comes early." "Stay," the word escaped before he could stop it. "Just stay. Nothing improper. Just don't want to be alone tonight." She studied his face for a long moment, then nodded. They sat together on the old sofa, talking quietly about everything and nothing, her childhood in Ireland, his memories of Sarah, dreams for the children's future. Somewhere in the deep of night, she dozed off against his shoulder, and he held himself still as stone rather than wake her. When dawn broke, she stirred, blushing at finding herself in his arms, but she didn't pull away immediately, and he didn't let go. "Thank you," she whispered, "for being who you are." Then she was gone, hurrying back to the children and propriety and the careful distance she maintained in daylight. But something had shifted between them, subtle as moved survey markers, but just as significant. The community that had pulled together during the storm continued to surprise him. Mrs. Zhao organized the women to create a cooperative, pooling resources and skills. The Morrisons, despite their own struggles, shared what little they had, even some of Barlow's ranch hands, seeing how the wind was blowing, quietly offered support. Deputy Nora Black, now acting sheriff with Crane suspension, stopped by with an interesting proposition. "Town council's meeting next week," she said. "Question of water rights is on the agenda. Might be time to establish some local precedents before the railroad tries to override them." "What kind of precedents?" "The kind that protect existing claims and community resources. If the town formally recognizes the bend as essential to Dry Creek's survival." She smiled. "Well, federal law's one thing, but local ordinances carry weight too." Matt felt a spark of hope. "You think it could work?" "I think it's worth trying, especially if you've got the whole town behind you." As she rode away, Matt looked out over his land with new eyes. Maybe he'd been thinking too small, trying to protect just his own claim. Maybe the answer was bigger community rights, shared resources, the kind of legal framework that recognized what really mattered. That evening, he gathered with others at the cabin Lila, the Morrisons, Doc Whitcomb, Mrs. Zhao. They talked late into the night, planning and plotting like generals before a battle. Because that's what it was, really. A battle for the soul of Dry Creek, fought with papers and precedents instead of bullets. When the meeting broke up, Lila lingered again. "You're building something," she said softly. "Not just defending building." "We're building something," he corrected. "All of us together." She smiled, and for a moment he glimpsed what the future might hold, not just survival, but something richer, a community bound by choice and struggle, strong enough to weather any storm. The railroad whistle sounded again in the distance, closer than before. But Matt found he wasn't afraid anymore. Let them come with their federal backing and legal manipulations. Dry Creek had something stronger, people who'd chosen to stand together, to fight for more than individual gain. And at the center of it, constant as the underground spring, was the growing bond between a lonely surveyor and a stubborn Irish woman who taught him to hope again. Water in the desert, love in a hard place. Sometimes that was enough to change the world. The journey to Cheyenne took 3 days through country that couldn't decide if it was spring or winter. Patches of snow still clung to north-facing slopes while early wildflowers pushed through in the valleys. Matt drove the wagon careful over roads that alternated between frozen ruts and sucking mud. Lila beside him on the bench while the children huddled in back among their supplies. They'd left Dry Creek with half the town seeing them off. Mrs. Zhao had pressed a packet of tea into Lila's hands, for courage. She'd said. Doc Whitcomb had pulled Matt aside with last-minute advice about which judges to avoid and which might listen to reason. Even Henry Morrison, still on crutches, had hobbled out to wish them luck. Now, as the territorial capital came into view, Matt felt the weight of all those hopes riding with them. Cheyenne sprawled rough and ambitious across the plain. A town trying hard to be a city. The Union Pacific had made it a division point, and money flowed through like water through sand, enriching some, leaving others dry. "It's so big," Jessie whispered, peering out from the wagon bed. "Just buildings," Molly said. But Matt heard the nervousness she was trying to hide. "Same as Dry Creek, only more of them." They found lodging at a boarding house run by a German widow who took one look at the children and quoted half her usual rate. "I know trouble when I see it," she said, but her eyes were kind. "You keep those little ones quiet. We'll get along fine." The hearing was set for the next morning at the Territorial Courthouse, an impressive brick building that seemed designed to make common folk feel small. Matt had spent good money on a lawyer, Thomas Garrett, recommended by his old Army contact. Garrett was young, but sharp, with a kind of quiet intensity that suggested he took things personal. "Tell me everything," Garrett said when they met in his office. "Every detail about how you came to care for Jessie, every interaction with Crane, every threat made." They talked for hours, the children fidgeting until Garrett's secretary took pity and found them picture books to look at. By the end, the lawyer was frowning. "The law's against us," he said blunt. "Crane's got legal precedent on his side, but law and justice aren't always the same thing. We'll make the moral argument and hope Judge Carlisle is having a good day." That evening, while Lila settled the children, Matt walked the streets of Cheyenne trying to calm his nerves. The city felt different from Dry Creek, harder, less forgiving. He passed saloons spilling yellow light and laughter, hotels advertising hot baths and clean sheets, shops displaying goods his neighbors could never afford. At the train depot, he stood watching the engines come and go, massive iron beasts that shrieked progress with every whistle. One of them bore the logo of the company trying to take his land. He wondered if Crane was already here, spreading his poison in official ears. "Impressive, aren't they?" Matt turned to find a well-dressed man watching him, Eastern accent marking him as railroad money. "Just machines," Matt said. "Machines that are changing the world. Mr. Pike." The man smiled at Matt's surprise. "Oh yes, I know who you are. The stubborn surveyor with the water rights we need. I'm James Thornton, assistant to Mr. Barlow." "Then we've got nothing to discuss. Don't we? I understand you're here about some custody matter. Unfortunate situation. The kind of thing that could go either way, depending on various factors." Matt's hands clenched. "If you're suggesting—" "I'm suggesting nothing, merely observing that the world runs on reciprocal arrangements. You help us, we help you. Simple business." "Not interested." Thornton shrugged. "Pity. Judge Carlisle is known to be sympathetic to railroad interests. Still, I'm sure your lawyer has explained the odds." He walked away, leaving Matt with a sick feeling in his stomach. The game was rigged before they'd even started playing. Back at the boarding house, he found Lila sitting by the window, mending one of Jessie's shirts by lamplight. The children were asleep, worn out by the strange city and impending tomorrow. "Couldn't sleep either?" she asked softly. Matt told her about Thornton's offer. Her needle paused, then resumed its steady rhythm. "They're trying to break us before we even get to court. Maybe we should consider—" "No." She looked up, green eyes fierce. "We don't trade Jessie's future for land. We don't trade any of their futures for anything. Even if we lose. Especially if we lose, at least we'll have fought clean." Matt sat beside her, careful to maintain proper distance. "You're stronger than me. Lila Hart." "No, just more stubborn." She managed a smile. "Besides, someone recently told me that sometimes right matters more than legal." They sat in companionable silence until the courthouse clock struck midnight. Tomorrow would come whether they were ready or not. The courtroom was packed when they arrived. Word had spread about the case, the Irish woman fighting for children not her own, the surveyor standing against railroad interests. It made for good drama. and Cheyenne loved its entertainments. Crane was already there, wearing a new suit and an expression of righteous concern. Beside him sat a severe woman from the Children's Aid Society and two lawyers who looked like they ate smaller lawyers for breakfast. Judge Carlisle entered with all the pomp the territorial court could muster. He was older than Matt expected, with shrewd eyes that seemed to catalog everyone present. When his gaze lingered on Thornton in the gallery, Matt's heart sank. Crane's side presented first. They painted Lila as unstable, possibly delusional, certainly unfit. They had affidavits from concerned citizens in Dry Creek. Matt recognized two names as Barlow's men. They presented the law, in all its black and white certainty. Jessie was not her blood. She had no legal claim. The boy deserved proper placement. Furthermore, Crane's lawyer intoned, there are questions about Mrs. Hart's own background, her husband's debts, her flight from Colorado, her irregular living arrangements in Dry Creek. Matt saw Lila's knuckles go white where she gripped her hands together, but she kept her chin high, meeting every accusation with steady dignity. When Garrett rose for their defense, he started simple. Your Honor, I'd like to call Dr. Whitcomb to speak to Mrs. Hart's character. Doc had made the journey on his own coin, and his testimony rang with truth. He spoke of Lila's dedication, the children's obvious health and happiness, the way she'd worked herself raw to provide for them. Deputy Nora Black testified next, careful and precise about dates and events. Her testimony about the intercepted telegrams drew murmurs from the gallery and a dark look from Crane. Then Garrett called Lila herself. She took the stand like someone walking to their execution, but her voice was clear as she told her story. The dying parents, the promise made, the journey west with 3 frightened children depending on her. Jessie had nightmares every night for months, she said. He'd wake screaming for parents who couldn't answer. I held him through those terrors, taught him it was safe to sleep again. I've been more than guardian. I've been the bridge between his old life and new. Yet you have no legal documentation of the parents' wishes. Crane's lawyer pressed on cross-examination. Dying people don't usually have lawyers present. They have last words, last hopes. I was witness to those. Convenient that you're the only witness. Lila's chin lifted. Would it be more convenient if I'd left him to die alone in that alley, because that was the alternative? The lawyer hammered at her lack of husband, her poverty, the inappropriate arrangement of living on Matt's property. Through it all, Lila answered with quiet dignity that made her interrogator look smaller with each attack. Then Jessie stood up in the gallery. I want to talk. Judge Carlisle frowned. Young man, you need to sit down. No. Jessie's voice cracked but didn't break. Everyone's talking about me, but nobody asks me? Garrett seized the moment. Your Honor, the child has a right to be heard in matters concerning his welfare. Carlisle deliberated, then nodded. This is irregular, but bring the boy forward. Jessie walked to the front of the court, looking impossibly small in his best clothes sewn by Lila's careful hands. Garrett knelt to his level. Jessie, can you tell the judge who you want to live with? Lila. No hesitation. She's my family now, even though she's not your real mother. Jessie's face scrunched in confusion. Real mothers don't leave. Lila doesn't leave, so she's real. From such simple wisdom, legal arguments crumbled. But Crane's lawyer wasn't done. Your Honor, the child's preference, while touching, doesn't override law. The territorial statutes are clear. The statutes be damned. Everyone turned to stare at Matt, who'd stood without conscious thought. Your Honor, forgive the outburst, but we're dancing around the real issue here. This isn't about law, it's about leverage. Crane works for the railroad now. They want my water rights. This whole charade is about forcing me to sell by threatening the people He stopped, swallowed. By threatening my family. Mr. Pike, you're out of order, Carlisle warned. Then let me get an order. Matt pulled papers from his coat. Surveyor's documents, showing how the property lines at Pike's Bend have been tampered with. Affidavits from townspeople about Crane's threats and intimidation. A telegram from Father Kowalski in Denver confirming Jesse's parents' wishes, the one Deputy Black had to smuggle past Crane's interference. He handed them to the bailiff. If this court cares about justice instead of railroad interests, look at the evidence. All of it. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Thornton was on his feet, gesturing urgently at the judge. Carlyle gavelled for order, his face thunderous. I'll have silence, or I'll clear this court. When quiet returned, he continued more thoughtfully. Mr. Garrett, do you have anything to add to your client's passionate submission? Garrett stood smooth as silk. Only this, Your Honor. The law exists to serve justice, not subvert it. If we allow children to be used as pawns in land disputes, if we let wealth and connection override human decency, then what kind of territory are we building? Carlyle retired to chambers, leaving them all to wait in tense silence. Jesse had returned to sit between Lila and Matt, holding both their hands with fierce determination. Molly and Seamus flanked them, presenting a united front that needed no legal definition. 20 minutes stretched like hours. Then Carlyle returned, expression unreadable. This court has reviewed the evidence and testimony presented. While the law provides clear guidelines regarding guardianship, it also allows for judicial discretion in extraordinary circumstances. Matt felt Lila stop breathing beside him. The evidence of interference with official communications is deeply troubling. The suggestion that this proceeding may be motivated by factors beyond child welfare is concerning. Most importantly, the welfare of the child must be paramount in any decision. He looked directly at Jesse. Young man, the court has heard your wishes clearly stated. Then, to Lila, Mrs. Hart, while your lack of formal documentation is problematic, the testimony regarding your care of these children has been compelling. Therefore, this court grants temporary custody of the minor Jesse to Mrs. Lila Hart, to be reviewed in 1 year's time. During that period, proper documentation should be obtained and filed with this court. The gavel came down like thunder, and the courtroom erupted. Lila was crying, clutching all 3 children at once. Garrett was shaking Matt's hand, grinning like he'd won the lottery. Even some strangers in the gallery were applauding. Crane pushed through the crowd, face twisted with rage. This isn't over, Pike. You think you've won something. The railroad always gets what it needs, one way or another. Mr. Crane. Judge Carlyle's voice cut cold through the chaos. A word in my chambers about these allegations of telegram interference. Now. As Crane was led away, Thornton appeared at Matt's elbow. Clever play, but temporary custody is just that, temporary. A year passes quickly. Then we'll be ready in a year. Perhaps, or perhaps circumstances will change. They usually do. He tipped his hat mockingly. Safe travels, Mr. Pike. Do be careful on the road. Accidents happen. Outside the courthouse, in the clean spring air, their small group stood blinking in the sunlight like prisoners released. Jesse hadn't let go of both Matt and Lila's hands, as if afraid they might vanish if he loosened his grip. We did it, Molly breathed. We actually did it. For now, Lila said, ever practical. We've got a year to make it permanent. Then we'd better get started. Matt looked down at Jesse. What do you say, partner ready to go home? The boy nodded, then did something unexpected. He threw his arms around Matt's waist, burying his face in his coat. Thank you, came the muffled words. For keeping your promise? Over Jesse's head, Matt met Lila's eyes. She was smiling through tears. And in that moment, standing on a busy Cheyenne street with 3 children who weren't his and a woman who wasn't his wife, Matt felt more complete than he had in years. They stayed one more night in Cheyenne. celebrating quietly in their boarding house room with the German widow's apple cake. The children fell asleep early, exhausted by emotion, leaving Matt and Lila sitting by the window watching the city lights. "I couldn't have done this without you," she said softly. "You gave us hope when I had none left." "You gave me purpose when I was just existing. Seems a fair trade." She was quiet for a long moment. "What happens now, Thornton was right, they won't give up." "Then neither do we. We've got a year to build something they can't tear down. Legal protections, community support, whatever it takes." "And us?" The question hung delicate in the air. "What happens with us?" Matt chose his words careful. "Whatever you want to happen, I won't presume, won't push, but Lila, I hope we can figure that out too." She nodded, not trusting words. But her hand found his in the darkness, and they sat that way until the stars faded toward dawn. The journey home was different from the trip out. The children chattered and sang. The shadow of separation lifted. Even the weather cooperated, giving them clear skies and dry roads. But Matt kept watchful, remembering Thornton's parting words. Accidents happen. They were a day out from Dry Creek, camping by a stream, when Matt heard the horses, too many for normal travelers, moving too quiet for honest purposes. He touched Lila's shoulder, warning silent, and reached for his rifle. But the riders who emerged weren't Crane's men. It was Doc Whitcomb, Deputy Black, and half a dozen townspeople, all armed and alert. "Thought you might need an escort," Doc said gruff. "Roads can be dangerous for folks carrying precious cargo." Matt's throat tightened. "How did you know when we'd be coming through?" "Mrs. Zhao calculated based on your usual travel time. We've been riding out each day to meet you." Nora Black smiled. "Dry Creek takes care of its own." They rode home in a procession, the children waving like returning heroes. The whole town seemed to turn out, cheering and calling congratulations. Even some who'd been cool toward Lila before now smiled and nodded, recognizing courage when they saw it. That night, there was an impromptu celebration at Zhao's store. Music and laughter spilled into the street, and for a few hours, the threats and challenges ahead seemed distant as the mountains. Matt found himself watching Lila as she danced with Jesse, the boy standing on her feet as she moved to the fiddle music. Molly was teaching Seamus a reel, both of them laughing at his clumsy steps. This was what they'd fought for, not just legal custody, but the right to be a family, whole and joyful. "Fine woman," Doc said, appearing at Matt's elbow with suspicious innocence. "Shame to see her living alone in that line shack." "Doc." "Just observing. Man your age, settled and stable. Might think about making certain arrangements, especially with railroad threats hanging about." Matt looked at the old doctor. "You playing matchmaker now?" "Playing practical. That temporary custody would look a lot more permanent with 2 legal guardians instead of 1. Doc's eyes twinkled. "Course, there might be other reasons too, but I'm just a simple country doctor. What do I know about matters of the heart?" He wandered off before Matt could respond, leaving him to think about possibilities and futures and the weight of unspoken words. As the evening wound down, Lila found him on the store's porch, watching the stars appear. "It was a good day," she said simply. "The first of many, I hope." "Matt?" She turned to face him full. "What Doc said about 2 guardians being stronger than 1? Lila, I won't have you marrying for legal advantage. You deserve—" She stopped his words with a finger to his lips. "What I deserve is a man who rode through blizzards to help strangers, who opened his home without question, who stood up in court and called us his family." Her voice dropped soft. "What I deserve is you, Matthew Pike, if you'll have me." The world seemed to stop, waiting on his answer. But there was only one answer possible. Had been since the night he'd found her in that barn refusing to surrender. "I'll have you," he said rough. "Today, tomorrow, and whatever comes after." She smiled then, bright as sunrise. "Good, Because those children need a proper home, and I need a partner to face whatever the railroad throws at us. And maybe I just need you." He kissed her then, there on the porch with half the town probably watching through windows. Let them watch. Let them see that sometimes, in a hard land among harder times, love could still take root and bloom. When they drew apart, Jesse was standing in the doorway, wooden horse in hand and hope in his eyes. "Does this mean we can all live together now like a real family?" Matt lifted the boy up, settling him between them. "That's exactly what it means. Partner." "Good," Jesse said with satisfaction. "I'm tired of being scared." "No more being scared," Lila promised, wrapping her arms around both of them. "We're home now, all of us." And standing there in the lamplight, with music still drifting from the store and stars wheeling overhead, Matt believed her. Whatever came next, railroad threats, legal challenges, the harsh realities of frontier life, they'd face it together. Water in the desert, love in a hard place, family built from choice and courage. It was enough. It was everything. The grass fire started in the early hours of a Tuesday morning, when the world balanced between night and dawn. Matt woke to Scout's nervous whinnying and the acrid smell of smoke drifting through his window. He was out of bed and pulling on boots before full consciousness hit, the instincts of a cavalry scout still sharp after all these years. From the porch, he could see the orange glow painting the eastern horizon where his summer pasture stretched toward Barlow's land. The wind was pushing the fire straight toward the bend, toward the buildings where Lila and the children slept. He fired 3 shots in the air, the universal signal for trouble, then saddled Scout in record time. As he rode hard toward the line shack, he could see the fire spreading with terrible purpose, too fast and too straight to be natural. Lila was already awake, herding the children out with efficient calm. "How bad?" "Bad. Wind's driving it this way. We need to move the stock and cut a fire break, or we'll lose everything." "The cattle?" "Are the least of our worries. Get the children to the main cabin. Then come back with every bucket and shovel you can carry." She nodded. No questions or protests. This was why they worked in crisis. They moved like 2 halves of the same mind. Within an hour, half of Dry Creek had responded to the signal. Men and women formed bucket brigades from the creek, while others attacked the prairie grass with shovels and wet blankets, trying to create a break the fire couldn't jump. Matt worked beside Henry Morrison, both men black with soot and smoke, clearing a line of defense. "This ain't natural," Henry gasped between shovel loads. "Fire don't burn this straight without help." Matt knew it too, could smell the kerosene beneath the smoke, see the pattern in how the fire moved. But there was no time for anger, only survival. Doc Whitcomb had set up a first aid station at the cabin, treating burns and smoke inhalation. Mrs. Zhao organized the children into supply runners, keeping them busy and away from danger. Even Barlow's men showed up, not their boss, of course, but the hands who knew that fire didn't respect property lines. They fought through the morning, past noon, into an afternoon that felt like the inside of an oven. Just when Matt thought they might be gaining ground, the wind shifted, driving the fire toward the buildings with renewed hunger. "The barn!" someone shouted. "It's caught!" Matt's heart sank. The barn held their winter feed, the tools, everything they'd need to survive until spring. But Lila was already running toward it. "The horses are still inside." He caught her before she could enter the burning structure. "It's too late." "Jesse's pony!" She fought against his grip. "He'll be heartbroken." Together they could hear the animal's terrified cries. Matt made a decision that wasn't really a decision at all. "Stay here." He wrapped his shirt around his face and plunged into the smoke-filled barn. The heat hit like a physical blow. Stealing breath and thought, he found the horses by sound more than sight, cutting their tethers with his knife. The pony, a gentle mare Lila had bought with her saved earnings, was frozen with terror. "Come on, girl." He grabbed her mane, pulling hard. "Move." Somehow he got them out, horses scattering into the safety of the open field just as part of the roof collapsed behind them. He stumbled into cleaner air to find Lila there with a bucket, dousing him with water before he even knew he was smoldering. "Don't ever," she said fierce. "Do that again." "I had to. Jessie loves that pony." "Jessie loves you more," her voice cracked. "We all do." There wasn't time to explore that declaration. The fire had reached the firebreak, and for heart-stopping moments it seemed it would jump across, but the break held. The bucket brigades poured on more water, and inch by grudging inch, they stopped its advance. By sunset, it was over. Matt's summer pasture was black wasteland, the barn reduced to charred timbers, but the house stood. The stock survived. Most importantly, no one had died, though several sported burns that would scar. As people collapsed exhausted around the cabin, sharing water and what food could be scrounged, Deputy Black rode up with the news that surprised no one. Found where it started. Kerosene-soaked rags tied to tumbleweeds. 3 different points of origin. She looked grim. This was arson. Plain and simple. "Can you prove who?" Matt asked, though he knew the answer. Knowing and proving are different things. But Matt, there's something else. Crane's been spreading word in town. Says you can't protect what's yours. Says folks should think twice about standing with a man who brings trouble on his neighbors. The crowd stirred angry at that, and Matt felt a surge of gratitude for these people who'd fought beside him all day. "Let him talk," said Morrison, still limping but solid as an oak. "Actions speak louder than words, and we all saw who showed up to help today." As folks began the tired journey home, Lila found Matt staring at the ruined barn. The children were safe in the house. Molly reading to the younger boys, maintaining normal in the face of disaster. "We can rebuild," Lila said quietly. "It's just wood and nails." "It's the warning that bothers me. They're escalating. First legal threats, now this. What's next?" She slipped her hand into his, not caring who might see. "Whatever it is, we face it. That's what we do." That night, after the children were asleep, they sat on the porch watching the last embers glow in the darkness. Matt's hands were blistered despite his work gloves, and every muscle ached. But Lila's presence beside him made it bearable. "What you said today," he started, "about Jessie loving me. It's true. They all do. You became their father the day you carried Jessie through that flood." She paused, gathering courage. "And I meant the other part too. I love you, Matthew Pike, not for your land or protection or legal advantage. Just you." Matt turned to face her fully, seeing the truth written plain in her eyes despite the darkness. "I love you too. Have for months. Probably since I found you fighting the world from a sheep barn." "Then why haven't we—" She gestured helplessly. "Why are we still dancing around this?" "Because you deserve courtship. Proper arrangements. Not some rushed thing born of crisis." "Matt." She cupped his soot-stained face in her hands. "We've been through flood and fire, custody battles and cattle theft. We've raised 3 children together and fought for our home. If that's not courtship, I don't know what is." He leaned his forehead against hers, breathing in the smell of smoke and her lavender soap somehow still clinging despite the day's battles. "Marry me." "When?" "Tomorrow. Tonight. As soon as we can find a preacher." She laughed soft against his lips. "Let's give it a week. I'd like a clean dress at least." They were married the following Saturday in the ruins of the burned barn. The whole town turned out, transforming the blackened timbers into something beautiful with wildflowers and ribbons. Mrs. Zhao had sewn Lila a new dress, not white, but a practical blue that brought out her eyes. The children stood as witnesses, Jessie clutching his wooden horse and trying not to fidget. The preacher was new to Dry Creek, young and nervous, but his words rang true as he spoke of building on ashes, of love forged in hardship. When he pronounced them man and wife, The cheer that went up could probably be heard in Cheyenne. "Now," Doc said at the reception held in Zhao's store, "you're really stuck with each other." "Good," Jesse announced, making everyone laugh. "I was tired of having two houses." But even in celebration, Matt couldn't forget the threats hanging over them. Crane wasn't at the wedding, hadn't been seen since the fire, but his absence felt more ominous than his presence would have. That night, with the children finally asleep in their new shared home, Matt and Lila stood again on the porch, this time as husband and wife. "No regrets?" he asked. "Only that we waited so long." She leaned into him, fitting perfect against his side. "But Matt, what Doc said about being stuck together, he's right. Whatever comes next, you can't protect me by pushing me away." "I know." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "Partners. In everything." "Take me deeper," she whispered, and he understood she meant deeper into trust, into the partnership they'd chosen. "I need to know you won't shut me out when things get dangerous." "I'm falling," he admitted, holding her tighter. "Have been since the day we met. You're all I see, Lila Pike, and I don't want to stop." She turned in his arms, and they came together with all the desperate tenderness of two people who'd found each other against all odds. The burned grassland couldn't be fixed overnight. The barn would take weeks to rebuild, and the railroad still pressed its claims. But in that moment, none of it mattered. They had each other. They had the children safe and sleeping. They had a community that would stand with them. It was enough to face whatever tomorrow brought. Inside, Jesse coughed in his sleep, his lungs still weak from the smoke, and Lila tensed. "I should check on him." "We should check on him," Matt corrected. And together they went inside to tend their son. Because that's what Jesse was now. What they all were, family in every way that mattered. Legal papers or no. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. Thomas Garrett, their lawyer from Cheyenne, rode up just after breakfast with a portfolio of papers and a grim expression. "Congratulations on the marriage," he said, "though I suspect my news might dampen the celebration." They gathered around the kitchen table, Matt, Lila, and the older children listening while Jesse played with his horse on the floor. "The railroads made a formal claim on your water rights," Garrett explained. "They're citing eminent domain, arguing the greater good of progress. But here's the interesting part. They're only claiming the water, not the land itself." "What's the difference?" Lila asked. "If they take the water rights, the land becomes worthless? You'd be forced to sell for pennies on the dollar. It's a clever legal maneuver." Matt studied the documents, his surveyor's eye catching details. "These boundaries, they're using my own maps." "With some creative modifications. See here, they've extended the watershed claim to include areas that don't actually drain to your spring. If unchallenged, it gives them control over half the water in the region." "So we challenge it," Lila said fierce. "With what money legal battles like this can drag on for years? Cost thousands. They're counting on breaking you financially before you can win legally." Matt felt the familiar weight of despair settling over him. They'd won the custody battle only to face a larger war. "What do you advise?" he asked. Garrett was quiet for a moment. "Honestly, consider their offer. Take what you can get and start over somewhere else. It's not fair, but it might be survivable." "No!" Jesse's voice piped up from the floor. Everyone turned to look at him. "This is home. We don't run anymore." Out of the mouths of babes, Matt thought. He looked at Lila, saw his own determination mirrored in her eyes. "Jesse's right," she said. "We've run enough. Time to make a stand." Garrett sighed but smiled. "I had a feeling you'd say that." "All right then. We'll need to document everything, every water source, every boundary marker, every historical use of the land, and we'll need support from the town. Proof that taking your water affects the whole community." "We'll get it," Matt promised. After Garrett left, they sat quiet around the table, the weight of the coming fight pressing down. Then Molly spoke up. We could sell pies.
What?
To raise money. For the legal bills. I make good pies. And misses. Zhao says the railroad workers in town are always hungry for home cooking. I can hunt, Seamus added. Sell pelts and meat.
I'll help,
Jessie said earnestly.
I can gather eggs and pull weeds and—
We'll all help, Lila interrupted, eyes bright with unshed tears.
That's what families do.
And so began what the town would later call the Great Pie Campaign. Molly turned out pies by the dozen, sold to railroad workers who didn't know they were funding the opposition to their employers. Seamus proved a natural hunter, bringing in rabbit and venison. Jessie collected eggs with religious devotion, carefully counting each one. Lila took in more sewing than ever, her fingers flying over fabric late into the night. Matt surveyed for anyone who'd pay, documenting every detail that might help their case. The whole town seemed to pitch in buying pies they didn't need, finding odd jobs that required surveying, donating what they could spare. One evening, as Lila worked by lamplight and Matt updated his maps, she spoke without looking up. Do you think it's enough? The money, probably not, but the trying, that might be. She set down her sewing, rubbing tired eyes. I keep thinking about what Jessie said, about being tired of being scared. When did a 6-year-old get so wise? When he survived things no child should face. Matt moved to stand behind her, rubbing her tense shoulders.
But he's right. We can't live in fear of what they might do next.
She leaned back against him, allowing herself a moment of weakness.
Sometimes I wonder if we're being selfish, fighting this hard. Maybe the children would be safer somewhere else.
Maybe, but they'd also learn that when things get hard, you give up. That when someone powerful wants what's yours, you hand it over. His hand stilled on her shoulders. That's not the lesson I want them to learn. No, she agreed. Better they see us fail fighting than succeed surrendering. That night, as they prepared for bed, Matt found Jessie sitting by the window, staring out at the stars. Can't sleep, partner. The boy shook his head. Was thinking about my first parents. They died fighting too, fighting the sickness. Matt sat beside him, waiting. I used to think they lost. Jessie continued.
But they didn't, did they?
They made sure I'd be okay. They won by sending me to Lila.
That's a good way to look at it.
Jessie leaned against him, small and warm and trusting. So even if we lose the land, we win as long as we stay together. Matt's throat tightened.
That's exactly right.
Good. Jessie yawned.
Then I'm not scared anymore.
As Matt carried the sleeping boy to bed, he found Lila watching from the doorway with tears on her cheeks.
From the mouths of babes,
she whispered. He's right, whatever happens with the land, we've already won what matters. She kissed him soft and sure. Then let's fight for the rest of it too, for them, for us, for everyone who's been told their home matters less than someone else's profit. The next morning brought news that changed everything. A government inspector was coming to evaluate the railroad's claim. Not just any inspector, one known for fairness, who'd stood up to railroad interests before. We have 2 weeks, Deputy Black told them. 2 weeks to make the case that this isn't just about one family's water rights, but about the survival of an entire community. Matt looked at Lila, at the children gathering eggs and tending the garden, at the neighbors who'd become family. 2 weeks to save everything they'd built.
Then we'd better get to work,
Lila said, and her smile was fierce as a warrior's.
Time to show them what Dry Creek is made of.
The war wasn't over. It might never be truly over, but they'd face it together. All of them. Bound by choice and love and the kind of courage that grew from caring for something larger than yourself. In the distance, a train whistle sounded progress coming whether they wanted it or not. But here in their kitchen, with morning sun streaming through windows and children's laughter filling the air, they had everything worth fighting for. And fight they would. The dust storm hit just before midnight, turning the world into a howling brown darkness. Matt woke to the sound of windows rattling and Lila already moving, checking on the children. Through the chaos of wind and grit, he heard something else: horses, moving fast despite the storm. "Stay inside," he told Lila, grabbing his rifle. "Matt, please keep the children away from the windows." He slipped out the back, using the storm as cover. Through the swirling dust, he could make out shapes near the barn. 3 men, maybe 4, moving with purpose. One carried what looked like a torch. They'd rebuilt the barn just last month. The community had come together, raising walls and hope in equal measure. Now these men meant to burn it again. Matt circled wide, using skills learned tracking hostiles through worse terrain than this. The storm that hid them also hid him. He was close enough to hear voices when the wind dropped momentarily. "Grab the boy and get out. Crane wants him unharmed." "Jesse!" They were after Jesse. Ice replaced the blood in Matt's veins. He moved faster now, abandoning stealth for speed. The men were splitting up, 2 heading for the house, 2 staying by the barn. He had seconds to decide. The rifle shot split the night, his bullet kicking up dirt at the feet of the 2 approaching the house. "Next one won't miss!" They scattered, shouting confusion. Matt levered another round, keeping them pinned while his mind raced. 4 men, maybe more in the storm. He couldn't cover all approaches to the house. Then he heard it, the dinner bell Lila used to call the children, ringing steady and strong through the storm, the signal they'd agreed on. Help was coming. The men heard it too. One cursed, loud enough to carry, "Move now!" They rushed the house from 2 directions. Matt dropped one with a shot to the leg, wounding, not killing. The man screamed and fell, but the others were at the door now, and Matt was too far away. The door opened. Lila stood there with the old shotgun, Jesse visible behind her. For a heartbeat, everyone froze. "You want him," she said, clear and cold. "You go through me." The lead man reached for his pistol. Lila's shotgun boomed, taking him center mass, dropping him like a sack of grain. The third man grabbed for Jesse, but Molly appeared from nowhere with a kitchen knife, slashing at his hand. He howled, stumbling back. Matt was running now, closing the distance. The 4th man, the one who'd stayed by the barn, raised a rifle. Matt threw himself sideways as the shot cracked past his ear. He hit the ground rolling, came up shooting. The man spun and fell. By the time Matt reached the house, it was over. The wounded men were dragging themselves away, leaving their dead companion behind. Through the storm, Matt could hear horses departing fast. "Everyone all right?" His hands shook as he checked them. Lila, the children, all unharmed but shaken. "Molly saved us," Jesse whispered. "She was so brave." The girl stood trembling, knife still clutched in white knuckles. "I wasn't letting them take my brother." Lila pulled all 3 children close while Matt checked the fallen man. No identification, but the quality of his weapons and gear said professional. This wasn't random violence, this was calculated. Within minutes, the storm delivered what the dinner bell had promised. Deputy Black arrived with a half-dozen townsmen, all armed, all ready for trouble. "Heard shooting," Nora said, taking in the scene with professional calm. "Everyone whole." "They came for Jesse." Matt's voice was flat with controlled rage. "Said Crane wanted him unharmed." Nora's face hardened. "That's kidnapping, federal crime. This changes everything." As the storm began to die, they pieced together what had happened. The attackers had used the weather as cover, planning to snatch Jesse and disappear. Quick, clean. Professional, except they hadn't counted on Lila's ferocity or Molly's courage. "They'll try again," Lila said quietly after the children were finally back in bed. She and Matt sat at the kitchen table with Nora. The dead man's possessions spread before them. "They've escalated to kidnapping. They won't stop." "Then we stop them first." Nora held up a telegram they'd found in the man's pocket. This mentions a meeting tomorrow night. Canyon Creek Bridge. Midnight. Matt studied the message. That's where they were planning to hand Jesse over. Looks like, and I'm thinking we should keep that appointment. Lila's hand found Matt's. It's a trap. Yes, Nora agreed. Question is, for who? They spent the rest of the night planning. By dawn, word had spread through Dry Creek. The attempted kidnapping was the final straw for many who'd stayed neutral. Even some of Barlow's own men came forward, disgusted by tactics that targeted children. I signed on to work cattle, not steal babies. One grizzled hand told Matt, "Count me in for whatever you're planning." The day passed in preparation. Women who'd never held guns learned to shoot. Men who'd avoided conflict chose sides. Doc Whitcomb turned his surgery into a strategic headquarters. Maps spread where medical charts usually lay. The bridge is perfect for an ambush, Henry Morrison observed, studying the terrain. Steep sides, limited access, they chose well. Which means we choose better, Matt said. We get there first, set up in the rocks above. When they come to collect their prize, we end this. Lila finished. That evening, as they prepared to ride out, Jesse tugged on Matt's coat. I want to come. Absolutely not. You stay here with Mrs. Zhao where it's safe. But they want me. I should. Matt knelt to the boy's level. You know what makes a man brave. Jesse knowing when to fight and when to protect others by staying safe. Tonight, your job is to keep Mrs. Zhao and the other children calm. Can you do that? Jesse nodded solemnly. I'll be brave by staying. That's my boy. They rode out as darkness fell, Matt. Lila, Deputy Black, and a dozen others. The moon was new, leaving only starlight to guide them. At the bridge, they spread out among the rocks, taking positions with overlapping fields of fire. Remember, Nora whispered, we want them alive if possible. Dead men can't testify against Crane. They settled in to wait. The night grew cold, desert temperatures dropping fast without the sun's warmth. Matt felt Lila shivering beside him and wrapped his coat around her. Should have made you stay with the children, he murmured. Should have known better than to try. She checked her rifle for the 100th time. We're partners. Remember in everything. Near midnight, they heard horses. Matt counted hoofbeats 6, maybe 7 riders. They came slow, cautious, but confident in their purpose. As they entered the killing ground beneath the bridge, Matt recognized Crane's voice. Where's the boy? Coming, another replied. Team should have him by now. Should have I don't pay for should have. Storm complicated things, but they're professionals. So was Harlan, and now he's dead. Crane's voice turned ugly. That Irish witch needs to learn her place. After we have the boy, make sure she has an accident. The kind that leaves a grieving widower free to sell his land. Matt felt Lila tense beside him, her finger moving to the trigger. He touched her hand, steadying. Not yet. What about Pike? Someone asked. Let him live with the loss. Man like that, it'll break him. He'll sell just to get away from the memories. That's when Nora stood up on the opposite ridge, badge catching starlight. Silas Crane, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit kidnapping. The night exploded. Crane's men went for their guns, but they were in a crossfire with no cover. The fight was brief and brutal. When the smoke cleared, 3 men were down, the rest throwing away weapons and raising hands. Crane himself tried to run, spurring his horse up the canyon. Matt was after him before thought formed. Scout's powerful legs eating distance. They raced through darkness, dodging rocks and drop-offs more by instinct than sight. Crane's horse stumbled on loose shale. Throwing him hard, he rolled. Came up with a pistol. Matt left Scout's saddle in a diving tackle that sent both men tumbling toward the creek below. They hit the water hard, icy current trying to sweep them away. Crane still had the gun, bringing it around. Matt grabbed his wrist, fighting for control as they tumbled through rapids. The wooden bridge loomed ahead, not the stone crossing where the ambush waited, but an older railroad trestle. Crane got an arm around Matt's throat, choking. Matt drove an elbow back, loosening the grip enough to breathe. They slammed into a bridge support, the impact stunning both men. The gun went spinning into the darkness. Crane tried to climb the support, desperate to escape. Matt grabbed his leg, pulling him back down. "It's over. Crane." "Never." The man's face was wild in the scattered moonlight. "You took everything, my position, my respect." "You did that yourself." Crane swung wild, connecting with Matt's jaw. They grappled on the narrow support beam, water roaring inches below. Crane got both hands around Matt's throat, bearing down with desperate strength. Matt's vision started to gray. Then his hand found purchase on Crane's belt. With the last of his strength, he shifted his weight, using Crane's own pressure against him. Crane realized too late what was happening. His eyes widened as his balance shifted. He had a choice: release Matt or fall. He chose to hold on. They both went over, hitting the water again. This time, Matt was ready. He kicked hard for the surface while Crane, stunned by the fall, was swept under. Matt grabbed for him, actually tried to pull him up, but the current was too strong. Crane's hand broke the surface once. Grasping, Matt stretched, their fingers almost touching. Then Crane was gone, swept away by the black water. Matt dragged himself onto the bank, coughing water and shivering. Upstream, he could see lanterns converging as the others came looking. Lila reached him first, dropping to her knees beside him. "Crane!" "Gone. Current took him." He met her eyes. "I tried to save him." "I know." She helped him stand, supporting his weight. "It's over." "That part. Still have Barlow and the railroad to deal with. But not tonight." She kissed him fierce and desperate. "Tonight, we go home to our children." They found Crane's body 3 days later, caught in debris 5 miles downstream. The documents in his saddlebags, wrapped in oilcloth and miraculously preserved, painted a damning picture. Payoffs from Barlow, orders from railroad executives, a whole network of corruption aimed at stealing land from honest settlers. The federal inspector arrived to find Deputy Black with a pile of evidence and a town united in testimony. The railroad's claim to Matt's water rights crumbled under scrutiny. More importantly, several executives found themselves facing criminal charges. Doesn't mean they won't try again. Thomas Garrett warned during his visit to wrap up the legal matters. Different tactics, maybe, but the railroad still needs water. "Then we'll be ready," Matt said. "The whole town will be—" And they were. The attempted kidnapping had crystallized something in Dry Creek. They formalized water-sharing agreements, created legal protections that benefited everyone. When the railroad finally did come through, it came on the town's terms, paying fair prices, respecting existing rights. A week after Crane's death, as spring warmed toward summer, Matt found Jesse sitting by the creek with his wooden horse. "You all right, partner?" "Was thinking about the bad men, why they wanted to take me." Matt sat beside him. "Sometimes people do wrong things for what they think are right reasons. Doesn't make it right, just makes it human." "Mr. Crane's dead." "Yes." "Are you sad?" Matt considered lying, then chose truth. "A little. Not for who he was at the end, but for who he might have been if he'd made different choices." Jesse digested this. "I'm glad they didn't take me." "Me too. Son, me too." That evening, the whole family gathered on the porch to watch the sunset. Molly was teaching Seamus a new song she'd learned from Mrs. Jow. Jesse played with his horse, making it gallop across the porch rails. Lila leaned against Matt, her hand resting on the gentle swell of her belly where new life grew. They'd told the children that morning about the baby coming. Jesse had immediately volunteered to share his toys. Seamus promised to teach the baby to hunt. Molly had burst into tears of joy, hugging Lila so tight she could barely breathe.
You did it, Lila murmured now, watching their family. You kept us all safe.
We did it, all of us, the whole town.
Matt, she looked up at him. I want to add something to the house deed.
What's that?
A covenant that this land, this water, can never be sold to anyone who'd use it against the community. That it stays protected, no matter what comes. He kissed her temple. Consider it done. As darkness fell and stars emerged, they stayed on the porch, listening to the children's voices and the eternal murmur of the creek, somewhere out in the desert. Coyotes sang their ancient songs. A train whistle echoed in the distance, not a threat now, just another sound in the vast western night. They'd fought for this, fought with courage and cleverness, with community and sacrifice. People had died, dreams had shifted, but in the end, they'd protected what mattered most. The water still flowed from deep springs, constant and life-giving. The land still stretched wide under endless skies, and love had taken root in the harsh soil, growing stronger for the trials that tested it. Time for bed, Lila finally said, gathering the children. As they trooped inside, Jesse paused at the door. Papa Matt, we won, didn't we?
Matt looked at his son truly as now in every way that mattered. Yeah, partner, we won.
Good, Jesse smiled. Then I'm not tired of being scared anymore. I'm just tired.
They tucked him in, this boy who'd lost so much and found his way home. As Matt blew out the lamp, Jesse's sleepy voice followed him.
Love you, Papa. Love you, Mama.
Love you too, they said together, and closed the door soft on another day survived. Another battle won, another step toward the future they were building together. Outside, the spring bubbled eternal, and the stars wheeled overhead, and all was well in their corner of the vast, wild world. The morning of the final hearing dawned clear and bright, with the kind of crystalline sky that made the Wyoming Territory seem endless. Judge Morton had returned to Dry Creek for this last determination, unusual, but the case had drawn territorial attention. A year had passed since the temporary custody order, and now permanence hung in the balance. Matt adjusted his string tie for the third time, hands uncharacteristically nervous. Lila caught them, stilling his fidgeting with her touch.
We've done everything right,
she said quietly. The adoption papers from Father Kowalski, the affidavits from half the town, the proof of stable home and income. I know. He looked toward where the children were getting ready. Molly helping Jesse with his buttons while Seamus polished shoes. Just want it done, legal and binding and forever. The baby little Sarah, 3 months old now, gurgled from her cradle. Lila lifted her, settling her against her shoulder with practiced ease. The sight still caught Matt's breath sometimes. This family they'd built from fragments and faith. Papa Matt Jesse ran to him, arms up. At 7 now, he'd grown sturdy and sure, the haunted look gone from his eyes. Do I have to talk to the judge again? Only if you want to, but I think he remembers what you said last time. Good, because I'd just say the same thing. You're my papa and Lila's my mama, and that's that.
Such simple truth from a child's lips.
Matt hugged him tight, then set him down as Molly announced they'd be late if they didn't leave now. The town had turned the hearing into something of a celebration. Banners hung across Main Street reading Hart Pike Family Day and Mrs. Jow had set up refreshment tables outside the courthouse. It seemed all of Dry Creek had come to witness the legal confirmation of what everyone already knew. This was a family, whole and true. Inside the courthouse, Matt was surprised to see how many had come from farther away. Thomas Garrett was there, of course, but also the federal inspector who'd ruled on the water rights, several territorial officials, and Matt's jaw tightened. Ephraim Barlow himself, sitting in the back row like a crow at a wedding. Judge Morton called the proceedings to order with less formality than before. This court has reviewed the extensive documentation provided regarding the permanent adoption of the minor Jesse Hart by Matthew and Lila Pike before ruling. Are there any objections to be heard? For a heart-stopping moment, Matt thought Barlow would stand. The man's pale eyes glittered with malice, but he remained seated. No one else stirred. Very well, Mr. and Mrs. Pike. Would you approach? They stood before the bench, Jesse between them and the other children close behind. Sarah dozed peacefully in Lila's arms, unaware of the moment's gravity. Morton's stern face softened slightly. Young man, he addressed Jesse. You understand what's happening today? Yes, sir. You're making it official that Matt and Lila are my parents forever. And this is what you want, more than anything in the whole world. Morton nodded, then addressed the packed courtroom. This court has seen many custody cases, but rarely one with such clear evidence of love, dedication, and community support. The documentation is impeccable, the home study exemplary, and the child's welfare obviously paramount. He paused, letting the moment build. It is therefore the judgment of this court that the adoption of Jesse Hart by Matthew and Lila Pike is approved and finalized. In the eyes of the law, he is now and forever Jesse Pike. The courtroom erupted. Jesse launched himself at Matt and Lila simultaneously, somehow managing to hug them both while shouting, "I'm a Pike, I'm really a Pike!" Molly and Seamus joined the embrace, and even baby Sarah woke to add her voice to the celebration. Through his own tears, and he wasn't ashamed of them, Matt saw Barlow slip out the back, face dark with thwarted rage. Let him go. That battle was won. Outside, the celebration spilled into the streets. Music struck up, and tables groaned under the weight of everybody's contributions. It seemed the adoption had become Dry Creek's adoption, the whole town claiming victory. Speech, someone called, and others took up the cry until Matt found himself standing on a makeshift platform, his family beside him. "I'm no hand at speeches," he began, voice carrying across the crowd. "But I know about surveying, about measuring land and marking boundaries. For years, I thought that's what mattered, the lines on maps, the papers in courthouses." He looked at Lila, at their children. "But family isn't about boundaries. It's about choosing to stand together when the world tries to tear you apart. It's about a woman brave enough to save children not her own, kids courageous enough to trust again, and a town that reminds us daily what community means." He raised his glass of Mrs. Zhao's lemonade. "To Dry Creek, to family, to the official arrival of Jesse Pike, though he's been my son since the day he asked me to keep his wooden horse safe." The cheer that went up probably reached Cheyenne. As the afternoon wore on, Matt found himself watching the celebration with a surveyor's eye, mapping moments, Jesse racing with other children, no longer apart but fully belonging, Molly dancing with the Morrison boy, growing up too fast but growing up safe, Seamus showing off his latest carving to admiring adults, Lila laughing with the church women. Sarah passed from arm to arm like the community's baby she was. "Quite the family you've built." Matt turned to find Deputy Black Sheriff Black now, the promotion well-earned, standing beside him. "We all built it," he said. "You as much as anyone." "Maybe, but you and Lila gave us something to build around." She paused. "You know Barlow's not done. He's still got influence, still wants your water." "I know, but he can't use the children against us anymore. Can't threaten what's legally protected." "No, but he'll find other ways. Men like that always do." Matt nodded, but found he couldn't muster much worry. "Not today. Then we'll face that when it comes together." As sunset approached, the celebration gradually wound down. Families drifted home, calls of congratulation following the Pikes as they made their own way back. The children were exhausted from excitement. Even Jesse's endless energy finally depleted. At the cabin, they maintained the evening ritual even though everyone was worn out. Matt read from the book of stories while Lila settled Sarah. The older children listened with half-closed eyes, safe and warm and home.
Papa, Jesse mumbled as Matt tucked him in. Is it real now? Forever real?
Forever real, Matt confirmed. Judge said so. More importantly, we say so.
Good. Jesse's eyes closed. Love you, Papa.
I love you too, son. In their own room, with all children finally asleep, Matt and Lila sat by the window watching stars emerge. The blue shawl she'd worn so long as armor hung on a peg by the door still treasured, but no longer needed as protection.
We did it,
she said softly.
Everything we fought for.
Most of it, Matt agreed. Still got to deal with Barlow and whoever replaces Crane. Still got to make sure the water compact holds. But the children are safe. Protected. Ours.
Ours,
he repeated, savoring the word. They sat in comfortable silence, her head on his shoulder, watching the night deepen. Then Lila spoke again, voice thoughtful. I want to start a school. Matt wasn't surprised. Lila's mind never stopped working, planning, building. Tell me. A proper school for Dry Creek. Free for all children, funded by the Water Compact. Mrs. Giles offered to teach languages. Doc could do science lessons. Her voice gained enthusiasm. We could build it near the spring, where the sound of water would remind everyone what we're protecting. And you'd teach reading, writing, arithmetic. But more than that, teach them to question, to stand up, to know their worth isn't determined by where they come from. Matt kissed her temple.
Jesse was right. You are real, the realest person I know.
She turned in his arms, green eyes bright with plans and purpose.
Will you survey the land for it, make it official?
I'll survey any dream you want to build. That night, after loving whispers and gentle touches, they lay entwined, watching moonlight paint silver squares on the floor. Matt thought about the long road that had brought them here, the losses that had nearly broken them, the fights that had forged them, the choice to trust when trust seemed foolish. No regrets, Lila asked drowsily. Only one. She tensed slightly.
What?
That it took so long to find you. Wish we'd had more time. We have the rest of our lives. Matthew Pike. Not long enough. Not nearly long enough. The next morning brought the new normal of their lives. Breakfast chaos with 5 to feed. Chores divided among willing hands. Jesse following Matt to learn surveying while Molly helped Lila with the baby. Seamus had started apprenticing with the blacksmith, coming home soot-covered and proud. In the afternoon, while Matt updated his maps, he found himself adding new notations, not just boundary lines and water sources, but markers of meaning. Where Jesse caught his first fish, Molly's wildflower meadow, site of future school. The land was more than property now. It was story, memory, hope. A rider approaching broke his reverie. Not Barlow or his men, but a stranger on a tired horse. City clothes marked him as Eastern, though dust and wear suggested a long journey. Ah, Mr. Pike, Matthew Pike. I am. The man dismounted, pulling papers from his saddlebag. Theodore Hartman, attorney from Chicago. I represent the estate of one Cornelius Hart. Matt's wariness sharpened. State your business, Mr. Hartman. I'm looking for Lila Hart. Excuse me, Pike now. I understand she married. At Matt's nod, he continued. Mr. Cornelius Hart was her late husband's uncle. He passed 6 months ago, leaving a rather substantial estate. And he left a portion to his nephew's widow, despite the circumstances of her departure. Guilt, perhaps, over not helping when his nephew was alive. Hartman produced documents. $10,000, Mr. Pike, plus clear title to a property in Denver, should she wish to claim it. Matt stared at the papers. $10,000? Enough to build 3 schools, to secure the children's futures, to weather any storm Barlow might brew. I'll need to speak with my wife. Of course, I'm staying at the boarding house in town. No rush, well. Within reason, legal matters. You understand. After Hartman left, Matt found Lila hanging wash, Sarah sleeping in a basket nearby. He told her about the visitor, watched her face cycle through surprise, suspicion, and finally a sort of sad understanding. His conscience finally caught him, she said quietly. Too late for Daniel, but not too late for the children. She nodded slowly. We'll take it. Not for us, for them, for the school, for protection against whatever comes next. Her chin lifted. But I won't go to Denver, won't set foot in that house. This is home. This is home, Matt agreed. That evening, they told the children about their unexpected fortune. Jesse's first question was whether they could buy more books. Molly wondered if they could help the Morrisons expand their carpentry business. Seamus had his eye on new blacksmith tools. We can do all of that, Lila assured them. And more. But remember, money's just a tool. It's what we build with it that matters. Later, as the house settled into sleep, Matt made his final survey notes for the day. He drew the boundaries of their land, marked the water sources, noted the improvements made and planned. But around it all, he sketched something more, the invisible lines that connected them to their neighbors, the bonds that made Dry Creek more than just a dot on the map. At the bottom of the page, he wrote Pike's Bend surveyed and claimed by Matthew Pike, improved and cherished by the Pike family, protected in perpetuity for the community of Dry Creek. Water rights held in trust. Let any who would challenge this know here, love took root in hard ground and flourished. Here, children found home and safety. Here, the future was secured not by force or law alone, but by the choice of ordinary people to stand together. So witness this day and all days forward, Matthew Pike, surveyor, Lila Pike, guardian, Jesse Pike, son, and all who call this land home. He set down his pen. Work complete, outside. Coyotes sang their ancient songs. The spring bubbled eternal, feeding the creek that fed the land that fed the people. Stars wheeled overhead, indifferent and eternal. But below them, in this small corner of the vast territory, love had carved out space for grace. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. Barlow would scheme. The railroad would hunger. The world would test their resolve. But tonight, all was well. The children slept safe. The woman he loved lay warm beside him. The land knew their names. Matt blew out the lamp and made his way to bed, where Lila stirred sleepily into his arms. All surveyed and recorded, she murmured. Every bit that matters. Good, then come to bed, Mr. Pike. Tomorrow we start building that school. He held her close. This woman who'd taught him that home wasn't lines on a map, but the choice to stay, to fight, to love when loving seemed impossible. Outside, the wind sang through the cottonwoods, and the creek murmured its endless story. And somewhere in the darkness, a child whispered prayers of gratitude for the family that chose him. Water in the desert, love in a hard place, hope planted deep and tended well. It was enough. It was everything. It was home. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect and share our thoughts about Matt and Lila's journey. If you enjoyed this tale from the Old West, please subscribe to Wild West Night for more stories of love, courage, and survival on the frontier. Don't forget to like this video and hit the hype button to help more people discover this story. Until the next time, partners.